Hello and welcome to SuperVideoGamers.com History of the Game Boy. The original 8-bit Game Boy first came out in Japan April 21st, 1989. It soon hit North America in 1989 in the month of August, and soon after followed up in Europe in 1990, September 28th. Selling 118.69 million units worldwide, with the first million sales coming in the first week of the Game Boy's release. That's pretty damn impressive. The total 118 million figures doesn't just include Game Boy sales, it includes Game Boy Color and Pocket sales too. Get onto them later. The best selling game for the Game Boy was the one that came originally bundled with the Game Boy, and that game was Tetris. The game of Tetris for the Game Boy ended up selling 30.26 million games. The Game Boy's predecessor was the Game & Watch, but we won't be covering them in this video. The original Game Boy is probably pretty primitive by today's standards. It only had 4 operational buttons, and they were A, B, Start, and Select. The Game Boy also had a volume control on the side for volume control, and a contrast controller on the side, which would brighten and darken games, because some games would be made too bright and the others too dark. The Game Boy was also kitted out with a headphone jack, so you could listen to all those lovely 8-bit tunes all by yourself. On the right side of the original Game Boy was a link cable socket, which allowed you and your chum to play 2-player Game Boy games together. The most popular game to make use of this feature was the Pokemon series. The Game Boy continued selling well for a couple of years. Then in 1995, Nintendo released altered versions of the Game Boy with different coloured cases. The cases were red, green, black, yellow, blue, white, and a clear see-through case. This was part of a campaign called Play It Loud. The specs of the Game Boy were not changed. Then, in 1996, Nintendo released the next step in the Game Boy Pocket. It didn't offer anything different specification-wise, but the screen was changed from the green and black screen that we were used to a nice crystal clear black and white screen. The Game Boy Pocket took 2 AAA batteries to power, which would provide a massive 10 hours of gameplay. This was a definite improvement from the original Game Boy and its requirement of 4 AA batteries. The Game Boy Pocket could also be used for multiplayer games. The only problem was when you needed to connect to all the Game Boys, because it required an adapter link cable to connect to all the Game Boys because of its smaller link port. The screen of the Game Boy Pocket was actually larger than its successor, the Game Boy Color, which we'll get onto shortly. The only problem with the Game Boy Pocket, like the older Game Boy, there was no backlighting, which made it difficult to play anywhere other than in your living room with the sun shining through or outside. There were limited edition models of the Game Boy Pocket released, including an ice blue version and a nice pretty pink version. In 1998, in Japan, another version of the Game Boy was announced. This was called the Game Boy Light. It's a very rare Game Boy, and you won't be able to find it unless you go on auction sites or whatever. The Game Boy Light is slightly bigger than the Game Boy Pocket and features a backlight for the areas. The Game Boy Light came in 2 colours, gold and silver. There were numerous special editions of this as well. There was an Astro Blue edition with a clear case, it also had an Astro Boy picture on it, and there's a Osami Tezuka World Shop edition with a clear red case and pictures of his characters, which, as you can tell, I don't know. There was also a clear skeleton version of the Game Boy Light, the Famitsu version, which only 5,000 units were released. This makes it one of the rarest Game Boys to find in the world. There was also a clear yellow edition, separate from the solid yellow Pokemon Center Tokyo version. Soon, it was time for an upgrade to the Game Boy franchise with the Game Boy Color. This was first released in Japan on October 21st, 1998, and as you might have guessed, this added colour to your Game Boy games. not to the old one of course, but to the new Game Boy Color game Spectrum. This time, the specs of the Game Boy had changed. The Game Boy Color had double the processor speed and almost 3 times much as memory as the original Game Boy and Game Boy Pocket. There was also an infrared communications port. A lot of people say that the Game Boy Color was a lot like the old Nintendo NES from the 1980s, although the Game Boy Color had a much larger color palette than the old NES. The Game Boy Color was a vast improvement on previous Game Boy consoles, mainly because, well, you can now play in colour. Another major component of the Game Boy Color, though, was its near-universal backward compatibility. The Game Boy Color was the first Game Boy to introduce this backward compatibility with all the games. This would follow on with later editions of the Game Boy like the Game Boy Advance, the SP and the Micro all being able to play previous games to some extent. The best-selling game for the Game Boy Color was, yet again, a Pokemon game. Well, 2. Pokemon Gold and Silver sold approximately 14 million copies combined. Another top seller for the Game Boy Color was the Legend of Zelda game, Legend of Zelda Oracle of Ages, which sold close to 4 million copies, and the Oracle of Seasons sold around the same.
Of the Game Boy Color, that came in an array of varieties. There were the 5 original colours of the Game Boy Color, and they had pretty stupid names. There was the Berry, Grape, Kiwi, Dandelion, and finally the teal one. Also, there was an atomic purple edition of the Game Boy Color, which was made of the translucent plastic. It was kind of see-through but with a purple tint. And oh my god, there's some limited edition ones as well. Here we go.
We had a green and yellow Australian version, a clear blue version, a clear orange version, Japan produced for the Turkish soft drink company that I cannot pronounce, an ice blue version, a midnight blue version, a clear green version for Japan, a clear black version, a clear version for Japan, and a yellow with a Tommy Hilfiger logo above the start and select button, the Tommy Hilfiger edition. There's a pastel pink version with Hello Kitty's head in the middle, only for Japan, and there was a ton of Game Boy Colors based around Pokemon.
So what was next with the Game Boy? Well, the people at Nintendo thought it was time to take it to a more advanced level, if you know what I mean.
So what was to follow? That's right, the Game Boy Advance, Nintendo's first 32-bit handheld video games console. It was released in Japan March 21st in 2001, in North America June 11, 2001, in Australia and Europe 2001, June 22nd. Like a lot of people said about the Game Boy Color sharing similarities to Nintendo's NES, a lot of people said the Game Boy Advance shares a lot of similarities with its power to the SNES, the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. The Game Boy Advance console went on to sell 81.5 million copies worldwide, and like its predecessors, its best-selling game was a Pokemon game. This time it was Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire, which sold a combined 13 million games. Pokemon Emerald was the second runner-up, as that sold 6.3 million games. The Game Boy Advance had a lot of backward compatibility like the Game Boy Color. It could play all the old Game Boy games, but this time, because of the wider screen, you had the option to expand the length of the game in the screen. It'd give you a worse picture, but it'd be a bigger picture. The Game Boy Advance didn't just have its graphics updated, it also had 2 extra buttons, and this time there was an L left shoulder button and an R right shoulder button. The Nintendo Game Boy Advance could also hook up to the Nintendo's GameCube via a Game Link cable. By doing this, you'd be able to access some bonus features of the game. Such games that included this were Metroid Prime and Legend of Zelda The Wind Waker. There was also a Game Boy Advance player you could plug in to your Nintendo GameCube, which allowed you to play your Game Boy Advance games on the bigger screen. Now, there were a lot of accessories for the Game Boy Advance. First one would be the wireless adapter, which was for use with Pokemon Fire Red and Pokemon Leaf Green. It would allow gamers to battle against each other wirelessly. Then there was the Game Boy Advance infrared adapter. This would only work with the game Cyberdrive Zoids and the previously mentioned Pokemon games. And as previously mentioned again, the Nintendo GameCube Game Boy Advance cable, which would allow more access with your Game Boy games and your GameCube games. There was something called a Play YAN, which was an MP3 and an MPEG-4 player for the Game Boy Advance, which would also work on today's Nintendo DS as well. There are also cartridges released for the Game Boy Advance called Game Boy Advance video cartridges. These would contain 2 episodes of 30-minute cartoon programs. These cartoon programs would range from Dragon Ball to Pokemon, SpongeBob SquarePants, Sonic X, and even some Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Now the Game Boy Advance was all well and good, and trust me, it was great for its time. But the only thing it was missing was some backlighting, and that's where the SP kicked in.
So we've now reached the 6th generation of Game Boys, and here we are at the Game Boy Advance SP. It was released in Japan February 14th, 2003, North America March 23rd, 2003, and in Europe March 28th, 2002. The Game Boy Advance SP sold a total of 43.5 million units, and like the Game Boy Advance, it was backwards compatible with the Game Boy and Game Boy Color, but the specifications hadn't increased since the last Game Boy. But it did have a couple of new features. One was that the Game Boy Advance SP was around half the size of the Game Boy Advance when it's closed. That's right, this Game Boy could flip. It was like a flip phone from nowadays. It could fold over on itself and it'd be very compact and very neat. The Game Boy Advance SP would also have a backlight inbuilt into the system. This was a great idea, allowing gamers like myself when I was younger to play Pokemon under the bedsheets by myself. Another thing the Game Boy Advance SP had was a rechargeable battery pack built inside the system. The Game Boy Advance SP came with the AC adapter this time, and this was great. All those days of going out to buy a pack of AA batteries just to play that extra hour of Pitfall in Game Boy Advance, don't worry about them anymore. The Game Boy Advance SP, like the Game Boy Color, except not so much, had a lot of additions to it. It was first released in Platinum Silver, and then Charcoal Black, then later a Flame Red version was added. Soon, there were 6 other special editions to be released by the Game Boy Advance SP. There was one based around an NES, one based around SpongeBob SquarePants, one based around Pikachu, one with a tribal design on it, a pearl green version, and a starlight gold version. It was said that Nintendo were actually planning to have the SP to be 3D compatible, but the resolution of the LCD screen was too low, so Nintendo scrapped that idea. Oh, I forgot to add, like the Game Boy Pocket, there's also a pretty pink version of the Game Boy Advance SP as well. And there was a limited edition Legend of Zelda Game Boy Advance SP, which came out with the release of the Legend of Zelda game, Legend of Zelda The Minish Cap.
Now the final Game Boy in the Game Boy series was the Game Boy Micro, and this would play all the old Game Boy Advance games. The screen was better lit though than the old backlit SP. The resolution was greater because the screen was a lot smaller, and it made the games appear really sharp.
So here are the facts about the Game Boy Micro. It was released around the world in 2005, but only sold 2.42 million units, which is pretty disappointing for a Game Boy. It did have that very small and sleek design that made it very appealing. The faceplates on the Game Boy Micro were interchangeable, so you can change it to look like more or less anything you want. And it weighed only 80 grams. The Game Boy Micro shape was rectangular. It was like this to imitate an NES controller. Unlike the SP, it had a rechargeable battery built inside. Although the Game Boy Micro has lost some backwards compatibility, it would now no longer work with original Game Boy games or color games, or the old Game Boy printer and Game Boy camera.
Remember, even though we have all these new Nintendo DS's and PSP's, PlayStation Vitas and whatever coming out, don't forget your handheld roots.